In this video, I just want to address what ADHD is like in females. Now, the reason for that is because, my previous episode or video, whatever you want to call it, I addressed the gender gap in autism and in ADHD between men and women who are diagnosed. But in this case, now, I would talk about men as well, but I don't feel like that's appropriate necessarily because I'm not a man. At least with the female side of things, I can address it and I can explain a few of my own experiences and that sort of thing. Right, so I'll just get straight into it. Now, essentially, when it comes to women with ADHD, the severity of symptoms is, varied. Essentially, that is the same, from individual to individual. I mean, it's a little bit different. For instance, it's not uncommon to see less disruptive or outwardly disruptive behaviors or impulsivity in women than it is in men with ADHD. Again, a lot of that seems to come down to innate differences with gender as well as differences in social situations. In fact, it's more likely to see symptoms of ADHD, especially more active symptoms like I said, impulsivity or disruptive behavior, to become more evident in females or in women as they grow older and into adulthood, or going through social what's the word? I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget. Give me a second. Oh, right. Going through periods of social or educational transition. It's when you change from primary school to comprehensive school, from comprehensive school to college to university, so on and so forth. If you're changing work environment, or if you're changing essentially where you stand in society. Now that just happens as you grow up. You go from a child to a teenager to an adult and your responsibilities change. Now if you're a woman, it's more likely in those moments because they're more stressful, because there's bigger changes happening, that the disruptive and the impulsive behaviors are more clear or present themselves because it is stressful. Now, I know when I changed from primary to comprehensive school, it was very, very difficult. And not because anything in particular made it difficult, it was just change itself was difficult. And that's common with autism and ADHD. It's hard to adapt to changes like that, especially, when you grow into a comfortable situation or a day-to-day routine that you're used to, because unfortunately, yes, things are going to change throughout life. It's not going to be the same forever. So it's important to adapt, but if you're neurodivergent, it's really hard to adapt because you don't know how to navigate some of those changes. You've already developed your methods for the other one and now you have to adapt again. So it's like you're back at square one. Now, that's why for women as well with ADHD, it's particularly difficult or presenting at that time because, like I said, going from primary to comp, my anxiety was worse. I didn't know anyone. I didn't have any friend groups. None. I only had one or two friends in my primary school because I wasn't great at making friends and I was a nervous wreck most of the time and I was bullied. But none of them came to the same school as me. So now I was at square one. And part of me was thinking, right, I want to become a more, sociable person. I want to become more confident, Primarily it's like a survival tactic to avoid bullying, but then at the same time I couldn't just make that happen because I was incredibly nervous. I didn't know how to talk to people. I wasn't great at social skills. So, but eventually I found where I stood and I got through comp. But then it seemed kind of change to happen from comp to college years, and then from college years to university, and so on and so forth. That's when it becomes more presentable. Now I had to write down these things because I had a very specific idea of how I wanted to talk about this. Right. So other than that though, it's also relevant to talk about comorbidities when it comes to women with ADHD and how it's different. Because a lot of the time, women with ADHD actually experience more internal struggles than outward struggles. It's more common to see the disruptive and the impulsive behaviors in men than it is in women. But in women, it's a lot more internal. That's when anxieties and such tend to become a bigger problem for women with ADHD than they might be for men with ADHD. Again, due to innate gender differences as well as social situations. Think about with the stereotypical male biology, there's things like testosterone, which basically just elevates aggression, protectiveness, elevates essentially an outward presence of how you present yourself. So, and then women is more internal struggles. that's not to say that both genders don't experience the same kinds of struggles. It's just sometimes, depending on if you're a man or woman, it's more likely to lean one way more than it is the other. So, for instance, my brothers, they tend to be more outwardly, their symptoms are more outward towards interactions in the world, again, impulsivity, and mine are more internal and mental struggles from day-to-day situations. So, but when it comes to comorbidities, I think I mentioned in one of my previous videos that anxiety disorders and such were very common to exist with ADHD, and part of the problem with that when it comes to women with ADHD is sometimes when they haven't been diagnosed when they're young and the symptoms are presenting themselves more clearly as they get older and they go to get checked out by the doctor, they're more likely to just talk about the anxiety side of things. And if they do, then sometimes that gets mistaken as the main or the base diagnosis and not as like a side diagnosis or a symptom of ADHD instead. So they could be diagnosed with an anxiety disorder and not ADHD because they're not seeing the other symptoms that actually mean you have ADHD. So it gets overlooked, and it can be a bit confusing then, because you could get treatment that may help with the anxiety, but not with everything else that might be going on. And I think I mentioned communication skills are a bit difficult on both ends, ADHD and autism, so it's hard to communicate to even doctors then when it's, say, if it's not working or if you think you need something more, because you don't necessarily know what it is that's going on with you either. So besides that, there's also things to consider when it comes to women, like menstrual cycles and that, and hormonal changes, because when those happen, they're already going to mess with you internally, with your emotions especially, which again, emotional dysregulation is part of ADHD and autism. And if you're a woman, then when you're going through certain cycles of your life where your hormones are a bit all over the place, then that's going to have an effect on the ADHD as well, and you as a person. So that's where it's also important. And I think there needs to be more support in that area, actually, now that I bring it up, just because those periods of life are already going to be stressful, but they're going to be twice as stressful if you're having to deal with both and you don't know how to navigate it. Anyway, I think those are the main issues or differences when it comes to females with ADHD. I might get my brothers in to talk in another video, maybe, to talk about men. I'll do a bit of research in that, and I'll ask them to talk about what's like for them as boys or as men, like how their brain processes it and how they try to carry themselves and why it is they feel they do this or that. And that might be interesting, because I'm not a man, I'm a woman, so I feel like it's more appropriate to talk about women on this one. But other than that, I think this is a good place to end the video. And if you like the content and you want to see more, then please leave a like, comment, questions, queries, I was going to say requests, but queries is a nicer word, opinions, thoughts, anything you want to say really. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you're interested, and repost the video because it's always helpful and I really want you to do it. But anyway, besides that, I hope you're interested and you want to see the next video, and if you do, then I guess you'll have a nice day today and I'll see you then. Till then, bye!